The worst part was not when my father told me to learn from my sister. It was that no one at the table looked surprised. By then, they all knew their roles too well. My father delivered the judgment. My sister wore the smile of a woman who had been chosen long ago. My mother lowered her eyes just enough to pretend she was not part of it. And I sat there, exactly where they expected me to sit, at the far end of the Thanksgiving table. Like the quiet comparison that made Vivian shine brighter. My name is Tessa Rowan. I am 30 years old. And by the time that dinner began, I already knew what kind of daughter my family believed I was. My parents' house looked exactly the way Gregory Rowan liked things to look: warm light, polished silver, heavy plates, too much food, and the kind of order that made every guest feel they were stepping into a successful American family. Vivian had even brought a few people from her world, which meant this was not really Thanksgiving anymore. It was another stage. My father lifted his glass and looked toward my sister with that familiar pride. "Maybe this year," he said, "you'll finally learn from your sister." A few people laughed. Vivian leaned back in her chair, elegant and relaxed. "Still playing with your little investments." Tess Miles smirked into his wine. I kept cutting my turkey. Then my mother tilted toward Vivian and murmured, soft enough to sound private, loud enough for me to hear, "Tessa never had your drive." That one landed harder. I did not defend myself. I did not ask her to repeat it. I just kept eating while Vivian went on about her company, her growth, her instincts, and the future everyone in that room seemed ready to trust her with. Her phone was buried in the pocket of her coat in the hallway, switched to silent so work would not interrupt the holiday. Then the doorbell started ringing like someone on the other side did not care whose dinner they were ruining. Who shows up like that in the middle of Thanksgiving? And as always, this story is a work of fiction, created by the editorial team at Revenge Pulse for storytelling purposes. While the housekeeper hurried toward the front door, I already knew this night had split in two. There was the version still sitting at the table with polished silver and carved turkey. Then there was the one that had just started moving toward us down the hall. A few months earlier, I had been alone in my apartment with Vivian's company filings open on my laptop when the first wrong note hit me. Not something dramatic, not some movie-style secret, just numbers that felt cleaner on paper than they should have. Revenue arriving a little too neatly. Timing that looked more flattering than honest. I did not call her out in public. I did not bring it up at a family dinner. I sent one quiet message. "Can we talk privately? A few things in the filings are making me uneasy." She called me 20 minutes later and did not even bother with hello. I don't need hobby investors reading my company back to me. I remember staring at the wall after she hung up. Not angry yet. Just tired. When Gregory heard about it later, he backed her without hesitation. "Tessa, reading reports is not the same thing as running a company. Don't turn paper knowledge into real-world authority." That was rich coming from him. The year before, he had almost tied up money in a flashy real estate deal with more shine than structure. I was the one who stayed up reviewing the numbers, found the weakness, and quietly talked him out of it. He took my advice. He just never told the story like that afterward. Still, I came to Thanksgiving. Not because I was weak. Not because I enjoyed this ritual. Because some foolish, bruised part of me still hoped one holiday might feel like a family dinner instead of a ranking. Then fast footsteps crossed the hallway. The room shifted. Sienna Park appeared in the doorway. Pale and breathless. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, looking at Vivian. But this couldn't wait. Sienna stayed near the doorway like she knew she had just stepped into something expensive and fragile. "I'm sorry for coming here," she said, trying to catch her breath. "But the board, legal, and Grant have all been trying to reach you for almost an hour." Vivian pushed back her chair so fast the legs scraped hard against the floor. "Then they can wait 5 more minutes. I'm at dinner." "They can't." That landed. The room went still in the way rooms do when everyone realizes the interruption is no longer rude. It is bigger than rude. Sienna looked at Vivian, then at the rest of us, then back to Vivian again. A major shareholder just dumped roughly $250 million in stock. The market's reacting fast. People are panic selling. The price is falling hard, and trading volatility has already drawn attention. "The board wants you in an emergency meeting tonight?" For 1 second, no one moved. Then Gregory set his glass down too carefully. Elaine's face lost color. A few of Vivian's guests stopped pretending to look anywhere else. "This is temporary," Vivian said, already reaching for control. "One large sale doesn't collapse a company." Her phone was still in her coat pocket in the hall. Sienna held hers out instead. "Grant's calling again." Vivian snatched it and answered on speaker before anyone could stop her. Grant Holloway did not waste time. "It's worse than the sell-off," he said. "The street's asking questions about our accounting treatment over the last few quarters. We've got people digging into timing, recognition, all of it." Vivian went pale, but pride held her upright. "This is an overreaction. That's all this is?" Across from me, Miles was already scrolling. His face changed first. "Vivian," he muttered, "your company's everywhere right now, and not in a good way." Gregory straightened in his chair and tried to put his father's voice back on. "Everyone calm down. Panicking will only make this worse." But the panic was already in the room. Vivian stared at Sienna. "Who sold?" she asked it again and again. I sat still, saying nothing, already knowing exactly where that answer was about to drag this entire table. Vivian's face changed first from shock to anger. "This is either insider trading or sabotage," she snapped. "Nobody unloads that much stock unless they know something or want blood." Gregory followed her there almost instantly. Not to the truth. To offense. His whole body stiffened like the family name itself had just been slapped across the face. "Whoever did this," he said. They knew exactly what they were doing. Elaine looked wrecked. But even then, her eyes kept returning to Vivian, not me. That was always the pattern. When something broke, Vivian became the emergency. I became the furniture around it. I stayed quiet. I had never lived the way my family thought successful people were supposed to live. My apartment was clean, small, and fully mine. My car started every morning and did not need to impress anyone. I did not wear labels with logos big enough to read across a room. I had never confused noise with value. They had, years earlier, after my grandmother left me a modest inheritance. I formed Rowan Hill Holdings and started building carefully. Nothing flashy, no dramatic bets, just patient entries, long holds, and disciplined reinvestment. I bought into Vivian's company when it was still small enough for everyone to call it promising instead of inevitable. Back then, they thought I was dabbling. That was the gift of being underestimated. No one watched closely. No one asked what I was actually building. They had already chosen the story they preferred. Vivian's phone, finally retrieved from her coat, lit up again. "Dana Mercer," Vivian answered and hit speaker with shaking fingers. "Dana, tell me what's happening." There was a brief pause on the line. Papers moved. A door shut somewhere far away. Then Dana spoke, calm and exact. "We may know who the seller is." Dana did not rush. "The selling entity tied to the transaction is Rowan Hill Holdings LLC." Vivian blinked. What Gregory's forehead tightened. The name had landed somewhere in him, but not cleanly. Familiar? Irritatingly familiar. Like a file he had once glanced at and decided did not matter enough to remember. I knew exactly what it was. I just did not help them yet. Vivian was already building escape routes out loud. That could be anybody. A fund, a shell, someone using a similar name, or somebody leaked something and now everyone's piling on. From the other end of the call, Grant cut in. "We've already started matching the path. This doesn't look like a simple mix-up." Miles leaned forward. "Could this be insider trading?" Gregory grabbed that idea the second it appeared, almost with relief. A villain from outside the house. A story that let the rest of us stay clean. "If someone knew confidential information," he said sharply, "then that's criminal." I looked at Vivian for the first time since Dana had called. "What about the revenue you recognized early last quarter?" The whole room stalled. Even Sienna looked up. Vivian's eyes snapped toward me. "Excuse me, the contract revenue," I said, "the one that showed up before the timing made sense." Miles stopped moving. Elaine stared at me. Gregory turned slowly in my direction, not yet understanding why the floor had just shifted under his chair. Vivian's face hardened. Do not sit there and pretend you understand things that are outside your depth. There it was again. Not fear, not humility, not even caution, just the same old reflex. Push me down, shrink me fast, keep me where she liked me best. Dana's voice came back over the speaker, calm enough to make it worse. We've identified the beneficial owner tied to Rowan Hill Holdings. No one breathed. Then she said it plainly. The beneficial owner tied to Rowan Hill Holdings is Tessa Rowan. No one moved. The kind of silence that filled that room was not ordinary silence. It was the silence that comes when a family hears the truth and realizes it has been sitting at the table with them the whole time. Gregory stared at me like Dana had said the wrong name. Elaine looked different. Not softer, just stripped clean of her usual certainty. For the first time that night, she was not looking at me as the quieter daughter at the far end of the table. She was looking at me as if she had no idea who I had become while she was busy admiring someone else. Dana kept her tone flat. Rowan Hill Holdings has been building that position over several years. The transaction landed at roughly $250 million because of the size of the holding and the timing of the sale. Vivian made a sound that barely formed into a word. I met her eyes. Yes. That was all at first. Then Gregory found his voice. How Grandma left me a small inheritance. I said, I invested early. I kept reinvesting. I managed it myself. No speech, no performance, just facts. Vivian still looked like she was trying to force the room back into the old shape. The one where I stayed small and she stayed obvious. You expect us to believe that I don't need you to believe it? I said. It already happened. Gregory turned toward me so sharply his chair creaked. Why didn't you tell us? That one almost made me laugh. Because the truth was so simple, it sounded cruel. No one asked. I let that sit there. Then I gave them the rest of it. I reminded Vivian that I had asked to speak to her privately months ago after I saw problems in the filings. I reminded her that she dismissed me before I could finish a sentence. Dana stepped in before Vivian could twist it. If Tessa acted on public filings and her own analysis, that does not automatically make this insider trading. There it was. The ugliest part of the whole thing was also the cleanest. The daughter they had just humiliated over mashed potatoes was the only person at that table who had read the danger correctly. Gregory opened his mouth again. You should have made it clearer. I tried. I said, you told me to learn from her? Vivian looked at me then, with panic and fury fighting for the same space. You destroyed me. Vivian stood so fast, her wine glass tipped and spilled across the white tablecloth. This is on you, she snapped. You dumped that much stock and started a panic. You broke the company. Dana did not even let the accusation settle. No, she said through the speaker. The market did not react to a sale in a vacuum. It reacted because that sale hit an existing fear. Questions were already forming around accounting practices and governance. A large exit made those fears louder. It did not create them from nothing. Vivian turned toward the phone like she could glare a legal conclusion into changing shape. That's not the same thing. From somewhere behind Dana's line, Grant's voice came in, lower now, stripped of polish. We did discuss the revenue timing internally, more than once. The room tightened. He kept going because at that point there was nowhere left to hide. There were concerns that we were pushing recognition too aggressively in a few quarters. We argued about it. Gregory looked at Vivian differently then, not like a proud father staring at his strongest child, like a man finally seeing the crack inside the statue he had spent years defending. The truth had moved. This was not about me selling. It was about her building something too fast on top of numbers she wanted to look cleaner than they were. Elaine's voice broke before mine did. But if you saw this coming, why didn't you try harder? She's your sister. I looked at her. Really looked. I do love my family, I said. But love does not mean forcing myself through doors that were slammed in my face for years. That shut the room up harder than shouting would have. Outside the dining room windows, headlights swept across the drive. Phones kept buzzing. Miles stared at the market updates with the expression of a man realizing success had a reverse gear. One by one, Vivian's guests started finding quiet reasons to leave. The room that had spent all night reducing me had run out of anywhere else to look. Gregory turned toward me at last, and when he spoke, the old authority was gone. How long did you know I didn't know a secret? I said. I read what your company already told the public. I just read it better than anyone in this room cared to. That line stayed in the air longer than I expected. Vivian did not answer. Her phone kept vibrating in her hand. Bored? Bored again? Then Dana, she picked up this time. Dana did not soften it. The board is discussing whether you need to step aside temporarily while this is reviewed. You need to be there now. Vivian closed her eyes for 1 second, then opened them like anger might still save her. It would not. Beside her, Miles had already changed shape. He was no longer the loyal husband standing near her spotlight. He was a man quietly measuring distance from the fire. What does this mean for me, he asked. Too fast? Too small? That told me everything about him. Gregory turned back to me, and I heard it before he finished. The family voice. The one that appeared whenever they wanted something wrapped in blood and obligation. If you saw the signs, he said, then maybe you can help stabilize this. Just for now. Calm people down. Buy some time. There it was. Not an apology. A reach. I shook my head. No. Elaine made a broken sound. Gregory stared at me as if the word had no right coming from my mouth. I'm not buying back in. I said, I'm not going on camera. I'm not using my money to rescue a system that laughed at me over dinner. Vivian flinched. But I looked at her anyway. You need to cooperate fully with counsel. And don't lie to investigators. Not once. That was as much mercy as she was getting. Elaine started crying then, not loudly, just enough to show she had finally understood the old sentence would not work tonight. We're family. It had opened every locked door in this house for years. Not this one. Sienna moved to Vivian's side. They left together. Vivian pale, rigid, stripped of every polished layer she had walked in wearing. At the door, Gregory turned to me. For the first time in my life, he looked empty. I was wrong about you. After Vivian left, the house went quiet in that heavy way it only does after something has broken past repair. No one touched the food. The candles were still burning. The plates were still warm. But the room had changed shape so completely, it no longer felt like the same dinner. Gregory tried first. I owe you an apology, he said, voice lower than I had ever heard it. More than one. I looked at him and understood something at the same time he did. An apology can matter. It just cannot travel backward and undo years. It cannot unsay every comparison. It cannot lift a daughter out of the place her own father kept putting her in. Elaine wiped under her eyes and stared down at her folded napkin. I told myself I was keeping peace, she said. I thought staying gentle made it better. It didn't, I said. She nodded once. That hurt her more than if I had raised my voice. I did not cut them off. But I did not move closer either. I love you, I told them, both of you. But I am not coming back into rooms where my only purpose is to stand there so someone else can look bigger beside me. Gregory closed his eyes. My phone lit up with a message from Dana. Vivian had been asked to step aside temporarily while the board reviewed everything. The market was still falling. Grant was likely finished too. Gregory did not ask to see the message. He already understood enough. The real cost was not just the stock. It was that somewhere along the years, he had turned his younger daughter into a stranger in her own home. A few minutes later, he looked at me and asked, quietly, will you come for Christmas? I looked at my chair at the end of the table and did not answer right away. By Christmas? The story outside the family had settled into the clean, brutal language the market always prefers. Vivian was no longer sitting securely in the CEO seat she once wore like a second skin. Her company was still standing, but it was moving through the kind of painful correction that strips pride first and numbers second. Her name had lost its shine, not all at once, just enough to make every room feel different when she walked into it. I did not become famous. I did not go on television. I did not start dressing like money just because money had finally become visible to other people. I stayed where I had always been quiet, careful, and exact. I took a few selective calls. I agreed to advise in small doses. I even accepted one invitation to guest teach, because real work had always mattered more to me than applause ever would. A few days before Christmas, Gregory called. His voice had changed. No command in it, no comparison, no lesson waiting to be handed down. We'd like you here, he said. If you're ready. I stood by my kitchen counter, looking at the small tree near the window. I'm not staying away to punish anyone, I told him, but I'm not ready to come back to a table that only learned my value after losing the right to dismiss it. He did not argue. That part, more than the apology, told me he had finally understood. So at the Rowan house, my chair stayed empty. For the first time, it was not treated like a place that would always be filled no matter how I had been spoken to. It became what it should have been all along, proof that love without respect eventually turns into distance. That night, in my own apartment, I set a smaller table for people who had never needed me diminished to feel tall. And if this story stayed with you, maybe it is because some empty chairs weigh more than the people who used to ignore them. If you have ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your self-respect, you already know why I stayed away. At the Rowan house, the empty chair finally weighed more than every apology that came too late.